The humidity in Savannah, Georgia, has a way of clinging to you, much like the suffocating feeling of being unloved. It's a thick, heavy air that smells of salt marsh and old money, the kind of money that doesn't scream, but whispers behind closed doors. I stood on the edge of the sprawling lawn at the Sterling estate, a glass of lukewarm sweet tea in my hand, watching my wife, Sarah, laugh with her cousins. The moss hung from the ancient live oaks like gray skeletons, swaying in a breeze that brought no relief from the heat. I was exactly 3 feet away from them, yet I might as well have been a ghost. To the Sterlings, I wasn't David, the man who had supported Sarah through her grueling years of law school, or the one who had held her together when her world fell apart. I was just the plus one they forgot to count in the catering order. I watched as Sarah's brother Jackson handed out expensive, hand-rolled cigars to everyone in the circle, pointedly skipping me as if my hands weren't even there. This wasn't a one-time oversight. It was a decade-long pattern of calculated, polite silence. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button. Give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. Welcome to Family Secrets and Revenge, where today we look at what happens when a man is pushed past his breaking point by the very people who were supposed to be his family. Sarah and I met in Chicago 12 years ago, during a blizzard that should have been a warning sign of the coldness to come. Back then, I was a rising architect, and she was a law student drowning in debt and caffeine. I poured everything into her. I worked double shifts, designing municipal parking garages and low-income housing, just so she didn't have to take out another cent in loans. I believed in her. I believed in us. When we got married in a small courthouse ceremony, I thought I was gaining a family. But the Sterlings are Old South royalty, or at least they play the part with exhausting dedication. They look down on anyone who didn't grow up with a trust fund or a last name etched into a library wing. My father was a carpenter. My mother was a nurse. To them, I was blue-collar, regardless of the degrees hanging on my office wall. Every year, they host this reunion of the roses at their ancestral home. And every year, I am the man in the corner, the shadow in the family photos. I've tried. I've researched their boring hobbies. I've brought thoughtful, expensive gifts, and I've tried to engage Jackson and his father, Mr. Sterling, in conversation about the city's changing skyline. Each time they look through me, responding with a curt, icy nod before turning to discuss a polo match in Wellington that I clearly wasn't invited to. The afternoon of the reunion was particularly brutal. The sun was a relentless white disk in the sky. I walked over to the long buffet line where Sarah's mother, Eleanor, was orchestrating the serving staff with the precision of a general. "Eleanor, the spread looks beautiful. The lilies are a wonderful touch," I said, trying to find a single crack in her porcelain exterior. She didn't even look up from her clipboard. "Jackson, dear, why tell the caterer we need more lobster rolls near the gazebo," she said to her son, who was standing directly behind me. She walked right past me, her silk scarf brushing my shoulder as if I were a piece of patio furniture. I looked at Sarah. She was standing 10 feet away, holding a glass of Chardonnay. She saw it. She saw her mother completely disregard my existence. And what did she do? She sighed, tucked a lock of blonde hair behind her ear, and went back to talking to her sister about a gallery opening in Charleston. There was no defense of her husband. No, "Hey, Mom, David was talking to you." That was the moment the first crack in my heart turned into a tectonic shift. Dinner was served under a massive white silk tent that cost more than my first car. There were 30 of us seated at a table that stretched into the shadows. And when I went to find my seat, I realized there wasn't a place card for me. Jackson's new girlfriend, a girl he'd known for precisely 3 weeks, had a hand-calligraphed card with a gold border. I had to stand there awkwardly until a waiter brought a metal folding chair from the equipment shed and squeezed me in at the very end of the table, near the service entrance. Mr. Sterling stood up to give the annual toast. He listed the accomplishments of every person at that table with booming pride. He praised Sarah's recent promotion to junior partner. He praised Jackson's entrepreneurial spirit, which I knew was just a polite term for him, burning through his inheritance on failed tech startups. He even toasted to the new litter of hunting hounds. But when he finished, he sat down without a single mention of my name. or the fact that I had just won a regional award for my latest design. It was as if I didn't exist in his world. The drive back to our rental cottage on Tybee Island was suffocating. The only sound was the rhythmic hum of the tires on the asphalt and the chirping of crickets outside. "You didn't say a single word to me all night," I finally said, my voice tight with a decade of suppressed resentment. Sarah didn't look away from her phone. Her face was illuminated by the blue light of the screen. "Oh, David, don't start. You know how they are. They're traditional, they're older. You just need to try harder to fit in instead of standing in the corner looking miserable." "Try harder?" "Sarah, your mother walked through me like I was air. Your father didn't even acknowledge my name during a 20-minute speech. And I have been trying for 10 years. "You're being sensitive," she snapped, finally looking at me with eyes that felt like flint. "It's one weekend a year. Just suck it up for me. It's about my family, not you." Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. I want to know, if you were in my shoes, watching your spouse watch you be humiliated, what would your breaking point be? That night the house was quiet, but my mind was a riot of noise. Sarah fell asleep instantly, her breathing steady and untroubled. I couldn't rest. The humiliation felt like a physical weight on my chest. I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water and saw her phone buzzing incessantly on the marble counter. It was a group chat titled "The Sterling Inner Circle." I shouldn't have looked, I knew that, but the curiosity was a fire in my gut that I couldn't put out. I swiped the notification. There was no password. She had never felt the need to hide anything from me because she didn't think I mattered enough to look. Jackson, is the draftsman still moping? Honestly, Sarah, why you brought him this year is beyond me. He ruins the aesthetic of the photos. Eleanor, he's a placeholder, darling, a temporary necessity. Once Sarah realizes she belongs with someone of our own stature, someone like the Vanderbilt boy she met in London, he'll be nothing but a footnote. Then I saw Sarah's reply, sent only 20 minutes ago while I was brushing my teeth. I know. He's just so useful with the bills right now. He handles the mortgage and the car payments while I build my equity. Give it time. I'm playing the long game. The glass of water slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. Useful with the bills. That was my identity. I wasn't her partner. I was her financier. I didn't scream. I didn't wake her up and throw the phone in her face. I stood over the shattered glass in the kitchen for a long time, watching the moonlight reflect off the shards, realizing that my entire marriage had been a carefully designed facade. I was an architect. I understood structural integrity, and I realized that the woman sleeping in the next room had built our life on a foundation of sand and lies. The next morning, the Savannah sun was already burning through the mist. Sarah was up early, glowing in a white sundress, looking like the picture of Southern grace. She was humming a tune as she packed her beach bag for the farewell brunch. "When are you coming, David?" she asked, not looking at me as she applied a layer of expensive peach-tone lipstick. "Mom said she's having the private chef do those crepes you like." "I'll be there in a bit," I said, my voice steady, sounding remarkably like the man I had been for 10 years. "I have some urgent work emails from the Chicago office. A structural issue on the new high-rise. Don't be late. Dad wants to discuss the summer house renovations at the beach property. He thinks your professional opinion might save him a fortune on the structural steel costs." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the cold calculation behind her smile. She didn't want my talent. She wanted my labor for free to satisfy her father. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I lied. The moment her SUV pulled out of the gravel driveway, the architect disappeared. I moved with a surgical precision I didn't know I possessed. I didn't pack everything. To take it all would be to admit I was hurt, and I wanted them to think I was simply gone. I packed a single high-quality leather suitcase with my absolute essentials: my passport, my encrypted laptop, my journals, and a few changes of clothes that I had bought with my own hard-earned money. I left the designer suits the Sterlings had picked out for me, the ones that made me look like a proper member of their circle. I left the $10,000 watch Sarah had gifted me for our 5th anniversary, which I now realized was likely paid for by the joint account I funded. I left my wedding ring on the marble nightstand, sitting right on top of a printout of the Inner Circle group chat. and I drove to the Savannah/Hilton Head International Airport in a trance. I didn't head toward our home in Chicago. I didn't call my partners. I walked up to the international counter, looked at the departure board, and saw a flight connecting to Tokyo. I'd spent my life studying the metabolism of Japanese architecture but had never visited. I bought a one-way ticket. No return date, no luggage to check, just a man and a carry-on. While I was clearing security, the Sterlings were likely gathered around a long table at the yacht club, clinking mimosa glasses. I could almost hear the conversation. Eleanor would be complaining about the humidity, and Jackson would be bragging about a stock tip he'd misread. "Where is David?" Mr. Sterling would eventually ask, his voice booming with impatience. He didn't ask because he missed my company. Well, he asked because he had a list of questions about load-bearing walls, and he expected his useful son-in-law to provide the answers for free. "He's finishing an email," Sarah would have said, her voice tight with the first ripples of embarrassment. 10 minutes would turn into 30. 30 would turn into an hour. The seat at the end of the table, the folding chair they'd forced me into, would remain empty, a silent plastic monument to the man who finally stopped showing up. My phone began to vibrate in my pocket just as the flight attendants were securing the cabin door of the first leg of my journey. Sarah. "David, where are you? The brunch is almost over. Dad is annoyed." Sarah. "David, this isn't funny. You're making me look bad in front of my family. Pick up." Sarah. "I went back to the house. Your car is gone." Where are you?" I didn't block her, not yet. I wanted her to feel the silence. I watched the Georgia coastline shrink into a thin green line beneath the wing of the plane. I felt a physical sensation of lightness, as if the gravity of the Sterling name had finally lost its grip on me. As we hit cruising altitude, I reached into my bag and turned the device off. "Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story and share your thoughts in the comments. Was it the way she used me for bills, or the moment I left the ring on that chat transcript?" During my 4-hour layover in Seattle, I sat in a quiet corner of the Delta Sky Club and opened my laptop. I didn't feel sadness. I felt a cold, sharp clarity. I sent one email. It wasn't to Sarah. It was to my attorney in Chicago, a man who knew exactly how much of our shared life was built on my sole income. "Mark, I'm leaving the country indefinitely," I wrote. "Initiate the divorce proceedings immediately. Use the attached screenshot as Exhibit A regarding the nature of the relationship. Also, freeze the joint account. Move the primary balance to my private holding account. Sarah has her own firm salary. Let her use it to pay for her family's summer emergencies from now on." Then I did something I had never done. I opened the group chat, The Inner Circle. I had added my number from Sarah's phone the night before while she was sleeping. "To the Sterlings," I typed, my finger steady. "The footnote has decided he's tired of being in your book. I'm moving on to a story where the characters actually have hearts. Enjoy the bill for the renovations. I'm sure Jackson's entrepreneurial spirit can cover the $80,000 in structural repairs you were hoping I'd do for free. Goodbye." Arriving in Tokyo was like stepping into a different dimension. The neon lights of Shinjuku, the disciplined silence of the subway, the way every building seemed to have a soul and a purpose. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't Sarah's husband or the architect for the Sterlings. I was just a stranger in a strange land. I checked into a small minimalist hotel in the Chiyoda district. The room was tiny, but it was clean and honest. I spent 3 days just walking until my feet ached. I visited the Nakagin Capsule Tower, feeling a strange kinship with its isolated, self-contained units. I ate at tiny ramen stalls where the only conversation was a polite bow from the chef. And I realized then that for 10 years I had been trying to build a mansion for people who were content living in a swamp of their own ego. In Tokyo, I saw beauty in the small things, in the functional and in the respected. If you were in my shoes facing a situation like this, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. Would you have the courage to disappear and start over in a place where no one knows your name? While I was finding my soul again in the narrow, lantern-lit alleys of Golden Guy, the life I had meticulously curated in America was hemorrhaging. I had finally turned my phone back on, not to speak, but to document. Sarah's messages had shifted from irritation to frantic desperation, and finally to a cold, jagged rage. "How could you do this?" she wrote in a flurry of emails. "My parents are humiliated, David. The entire community is talking. You left us with the lease on the Tybee cottage, the catering bill for 30 people, and Dad's contractor is threatening to sue because you never sent over the stamped blueprints for the beach house. Come home right now and let's talk like civilized adults." I sat in a quiet park in Ueno, watching the cherry blossoms fall like snow, and I typed a short reply. I didn't address her anger. I didn't defend my departure. I simply attached a high-resolution photo of the sunrise over Mount Fuji, a horizon that contained absolutely no room for her. I hit send and watched the loading bar finish. No text, no explanation, just the visual proof that my world was now infinitely larger than the one she tried to trap me in. 3 weeks into my stay in Japan, my lawyer, Mark, called me via an encrypted line. "David, it's a mess over here, but a beautiful one for us," he said, sounding almost impressed. "Sarah tried to go to the precinct to file a missing persons report, but I blocked that by presenting your signed affidavit and the flight logs. Then she tried to claim you were mentally unfit to freeze the accounts." He paused, shuffling papers. "Here's the kicker, David. I've been digging into the sterling legacy she's so proud of. It turns out the Old South money is mostly smoke and mirrors. The estate in Savannah is leveraged to the hilt. They've been using your quarterly bonuses and your architecture firm's dividends to keep up the appearance of wealth. Without your signature on the bridge loan, the reunion of the Roses might be the last event they ever host. Where they weren't just looking down on you, they were feeding off you." I leaned back against the cool glass of a window overlooking the Shibuya crossing. A cold, sharp laugh escaped my throat. All those years of being treated like a second-class citizen, like a blue-collar intruder, and I was the one keeping the roof over their arrogant heads. I told Mark to move forward with the most aggressive filing possible. I wanted a clean break. Not a cent more of my labor would ever trickle down to the Sterling estate. I didn't stay in Tokyo forever. The wanderlust had taken hold, but so had a new sense of purpose. I moved to Lisbon, Portugal, a city built on 7 hills with a history of explorers who weren't afraid to leave everything behind. I didn't look for a job. I created one. I opened a boutique architectural firm called Vanguard One Way. I specialized in honest architecture, minimalist, sustainable designs that respected the land, rather than trying to dominate it with fake columns and inherited ego. Within 18 months, my work was being featured in international journals. I was no longer the guy designing parking garages to pay for a law student's tuition. I was a creator. Success is the best revenge, but peace is the best reward. I heard through the grapevine of the Chicago design world that Sarah had been forced to sell our condo. The inner circle had grown very quiet once the bank accounts went cold. Without my income to subsidize their lifestyle, the Sterling's facade began to crumble like unsealed limestone. 2 years passed before I set foot on American soil again. I was in Atlanta for a major architectural keynote. I felt like a different species than the man who had stood on that lawn in Savannah. I was sitting in a quiet, high-end cafe in Buckhead, reviewing a site plan, when I felt a pair of eyes on me. I looked up and saw a woman who looked like a faded version of my memories. It was Sarah. She looked tired. The glow of the sterling arrogance had been replaced by a weary, defensive posture. Her designer handbag was an older model, scuffed at the edges. She stared at me, her mouth slightly open. "David," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Hello, Sarah," I said, my voice calm, devoid of the anger I thought I would feel. "You look different," she said, her eyes scanning my tailored linen suit and the expensive watch I had actually bought for myself. "I heard you were in Europe. I heard you were doing well." "I'm happy," I told her, and the word felt heavy with truth. "It changes a person's bone structure." She sat down across from me, uninvited, but I didn't stop her. She tried to apologize, but it was a sterling apology, one that still tried to shift the blame. "You have to understand, David, my parents pushed me so hard. They have expectations. I never meant what I said in that chat. I was just trying to keep the peace. We could have worked it out if you hadn't just run away like a coward. I looked at her, and for the first time I felt genuine pity. The thing is, Sarah, I said, slowly folding my site plans, I don't hate you. I don't even hate Jackson or Eleanor. I just don't think about you at all. You treated me like a ghost for 10 years, so I finally decided to become one. And I've never felt more alive than when I stopped existing in your world. She reached out to touch my hand, but I moved it away to pick up my coffee. The connection was severed, not by my anger, but by her insignificance in my new life. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story and share your thoughts in the comments. Did she deserve a second chance? Or was her realization 2 years too late? Sometimes a one-way ticket is the only way to find your way home. Not to a physical house or a family bound by blood and ego, but to the person you were meant to be before the world tried to tell you who you were. I learned that my value wasn't defined by the sterling silence or Sarah's financial convenience. It was defined by my own strength to walk away when the table was no longer serving love. I left the cafe and walked out into the bright Georgia sun. It was just as hot as that day at the reunion, but the air didn't feel heavy anymore. I was free. Thank you for joining me on this journey today on Family Secrets and Revenge. This story is a reminder that you are never just a footnote in someone else's life unless you allow yourself to be written that way. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible or used, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories of standing up for your worth and finding your own path. What would you have done if you found those messages on that kitchen counter? Would you have stayed to argue, or would you have chosen the one-way ticket? Share your overall thoughts based on my story in the comments below. I truly value this community's perspective. I'll see you in the next one.